This podcast is sponsored by Elevations. Do you want to distinguish yourself from everybody else in the competition? Do you want to get the absolute best buyers in the country? Do you want to close more accounts than anybody else in the market? Well, use Elevations. Welcome back to LA Legends, where average is not accepted, excuses don't survive. This is where mindsets get built, standards get raised, and leaders get forged.
Today, we're not talking tactics first. We're talking about the engine behind everything, your why. Because if your why is
Because your why
weak,
is weak.
your activity is inconsistent. And if activity is inconsistent, your results are predictable.
We have Mr. Joe Nasca. So this has actually been a guest that I've had circled forever of one of the people I dreamed to have on this podcast, because I can honestly and candidly say that I would not be here at Aflac without this man. Joe Nasca was my trainer, and he's the person that I talk about in sales school of. I sat in a classroom and I was like, oh, wow, my life is going to change and I'm going a different direction. So, Joe, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so fired up and so excited to have you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I mean, this is such an honor. I mean, where we started from, Mikey, back in the day to where we are today. I mean, wow, it's unbelievable, man.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, seeing you, I still remember being in the classroom and seeing you bringing just passion, vision. You actually help put words to things that I felt as a human being of what I want to one day be able to accomplish. And, you help dig the why out of me. And I just got to say, always, and I try to do this almost every time I see you, is thank you. So thank you, thank you, thank you. So I actually was hoping that we can dive into that aspect of things really quick. So not even really quick. Let's just dive into this whole why thing. So, in the classroom, and sometimes I'll just say, you've told me afterwards, you're like, hey, I am able to manufacture some of this and push people to get to their why. But can you just talk a little bit about how you started setting the tone, what the entire engine is behind this, and just let's get straight into it. Like, what's your why? How are you doing this? And we'll go from there.
Yeah, I mean, the why is so important, right? It always has been. And I think it's so overused in today's world of, why are you doing this and whatnot. But I think a lot of people in today's world are very scared to really go into what a why really is. It's one thing to say, hey, these are my goals, these are the things that I want to accomplish. But a lot of people don't really have the how to get there. So I think, Mikey, one of the things that we did back in the day that I still use to this day is everything has to start around the why. I don't think there's one call that I host or one training class that I do or really one conversation that I hold in my market where I'm not always aware of the why that's in front of me. Right.
Hmm.
Whether it's personal, professional, spiritually, whatever the case may be, I'm always aware that person has a why. And I'm always digging deeper and finding out what that why is. And some people are scared to do that. And it does take skill to be able to do that. But when you've got that person's why, that is true bond, right? That's true friendship. That's true love. I think in today's world, we live in a very interesting world where everything is social media based, right? And you really don't have that connection with somebody. When you've got somebody's why and you truly understand why they're doing what they're doing, it speaks volumes.
It does. It does. I mean, can you take us back a little bit? So, what was your why? Did it start off surface level, and how was it pulled out of you?
Yeah, that's a great question. My why started because I went through training, right? Like I'll keep my story simple, but I went through training way back in the day. I was a young kid. I was 18 years old, 19 years old. I didn't have a college degree, don't have a college degree. I barely graduated high school, could barely put a sentence together. And there was this really cool thing called AFLAC, right? And they said, "Hey, go to this thing called sales school." So I went to sales school. I went to my first training and I sat there and I just wasn't impressed, right? I wasn't motivated. I wasn't fired up. Nobody asked me why. Nobody asked me why, at 18, 19 years old, I was doing this. And I just remember walking out of that training and I drove a little green Saturn at the time. And I walked up to that car and I said to myself, do I really want to do this? And I said, can I do this? Those are the two things I asked myself. Do I want to do this? And can I do this? And I was scared. I was scared there at 18 years old that I was making a mistake, right? And I vowed, standing in front of my little green Saturn at that time, that I was going to do everything in my power to run sales for an organization one day, because I
Mhm.
never wanted anyone to leave any interaction with me and say to themselves, can I do this, or do I want to do this? I wanted people to be fired up and be like, you know what? I can do this thing. It doesn't matter what my past is, my age, my education, any of that stuff, right? I can do this. I can be successful. And I think that's always been my why. And that's really been my North Star. Like, I've always gone
Mhm.
to that, whether I've had massive success or whether maybe I've had some bad years, right? Like, I've always gone to, hey, Joey, this is what you've got to do to be successful. Just continue to stay the path regardless of what happens.
That was deep.
Yeah, I get a little deep. Sometimes people get mad at me in Aflac because I get a little too deep, but I think
No.
you've got to, right? That's how you inspire, that's how you move people, right? Is you have to get deep with them.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that because I've heard that story, right, of when you went to your sales school, the setup of it, and how you left it. Remember that first day because it was at a hotel and you're like, "God, is this it? Can I do this?" And so understanding your why is quite important, because everybody says, like, "Oh, I want money," or like, "I wanna make a lot of money," or "I want that flexibility," which is a big one that a lot of people say, but don't really understand how that works, or I want this lifestyle. But that actually won't carry you through, when you're getting punched in the face in the field day out sometimes, that rejection that we had. So outside of knowing that you wanted to make an impact, that when someone leaves sales school, was there a moment you were going through your first couple, let's say your first year, or even in your second year, a moment that forced you to actually dig deeper outside of that long game of what you're trying to do?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting story in itself. I come from great leadership in Aflac. I come from legends in Aflac, and with Joanna Walkrell being one of them. Her and I are family. We spend a lot of time together. We started off together. I worked with her as a district when she was a region, and I saw this training piece that I always wanted. Right, I wanted to be different than the sales school that I went to, and I told Joanna one day, hey, listen, like I really want to be a state training coordinator. Do you think Adam Michaels would let me do that? And she's like, I don't know, go talk to him. So I went and talked to Adam and I said, hey, listen, man, like I want to do this. I know that I can inspire people. I know that I can move people. And Adam's like, "Yeah, man, like, if it ever pops up, like, sure, like, I'd love to have you in that role." And I was like, "That's great." Maybe 3, 6 months went by, and that role was open. And I walked into Adam's office, and I said, "I'm your guy, man. Like, I want this thing bad. Like, I want this." And he's like, "Joey, I want you to have it. I want you to have this thing. I want you to, like, run with this thing. It's yours." And Adam was really one of the first people from a training perspective that believed in me. And we
Mhm.
haven't talked about belief yet, and maybe we should on the call. Maybe this is a next call, guys. I don't know. But like
We're
you
gonna do multiple, but
yeah,
yeah.
right. You've got to
Yeah.
find people that believe in you. At a very young age, Joanna believed in me, right? And we came up in the field together, right? She believed in me, and I believed in her. And that's a lot of where our success came from. And Adam was the one that believed in me and said, "Joey, you can do this." What really humbled me, though, Michelle, to get back to the question, is that Adam did give me the role, but in the meantime of me going home that weekend and coming back on Monday, there was somebody else that was on Adam's radar that popped up. And Adam actually called me into his office on Monday. Mikey, I don't even know if you know this story,
Yeah.
but Adam called me in and Joanna called me and she was right there. And they were like, hey, listen, like, we've got this person. They've had a little bit more success than you. They've done a little bit more than you have in Aflac. And maybe we should go that route. And I just remember being so deflated. Like my whole weekend, my then girlfriend, I went home and I was like, man, this is it. Like I'm living my dream job in Aflac, right? At this young age of like 22 years old. It was
Yeah.
amazing. And I had to go back and I left Adam's office deflated that day because now I had to interview against somebody. I had it before,
Mhm.
right? Now I had to interview. And I just remember going back in that interview with Adam and I was just like, Adam, I don't know how, I don't know why, but I'm your guy. I said, "I'm gonna make you a lot of
That's
money
awesome.
one day. I don't know what it's gonna look like yet, but I said, you've gotta give me this. This is my shot." And I firmly believe that people have shots, and some people say that people only get one shot, or I don't think that's the case. I think people get multiple shots in their life,
Mhm.
and this was one of my shots. And Mikey, it's such an interesting story because a year he gave me the role. I'm here, but a year later, when he got offered LA, he called me immediately and said, "Hey, listen, Joey, you're coming with me." And it
Yeah.
wasn't like a, "Hey, what do you think? You wanna go?" It was like, "No, you're my guy in LA." And a lot of
Yep.
people don't know this, but Adam couldn't leave Chicago right away because his wife was pregnant, right? And they were staying back here in Chicago. Adam on January 9th said, Joey, get yourself a plane ticket and go. And really, for I would say probably that first 3 to 6 months, I was out there really on my own
You were.
running the organization. Now, I share that part of the story with you because I think it's important to realize that belief is everything. If Adam would have not given me that shot, if he didn't believe in me, that LA thing would have never happened. Mikey, I would have never met you. Michelle, I would have never met you. I wouldn't be on this podcast right now. So I
Yeah.
think like when we talk about the why, it's like so much deeper than just, hey, I want to make a lot of money or hey, I want to change a lot of lives. Like it's really about your backstory and where you want to go and how you can ultimately get there.
Yeah, man. I just want to say two parts. One was that you were the person that I connected with because, yeah, Adam was, he was going back and forth, doing the best that he could. He'd sprinkle his magic dust, occasionally around and then fly back off. But like, you were the one that I was like, oh no, this guy like has depth and he just had it is so buttoned up. And also, yeah, after disc assessments that came out later, I was like, oh yeah, because we're both nerds and stuff. So, but
Yeah.
the other thing though, I just wanted to, talk a little bit about sales school. So how old were you when you were running when you came out to LA and helping run then I think it was the 30, almost a $30 million organization then, right? That's,
Yeah.
so, how old were you?
Yeah, I was 23, I believe 22, 23 when
That's
I got
crazy.
out there, and, Adam and I were living we were in a one-bedroom, apartment in Santa Monica. We had no washer and dryer. We had 1 parking space. We had 1 car. It was, like, the craziest, like, thing you could imagine. But, yeah, I mean, he gave me the reins and said, "Go get 'em," and I believe I was 22 years old when that happened, and I did all the things that I believe in. I took people out. I took care of people. I got to know them at a deeper level. I got to know their
Mhm.
families. I mean, that was such a great experience for me. I had a lot of fun in Los Angeles. I really did.
Yeah, I was probably 2 months into my career, 3 months into my career when you, ran sales school, and I remember going. So I wanted to talk about 2 specific moments that I remember, when I eventually because knowing you, I was like, "Oh, I wanna be a trainer. I wanna be like Joe one day." Like, and you actually, you helped coach me through it, talk me through it, and it came full circle. I wrote a letter to Adam and being like, "Hey, man, like, I wanna be the next trainer." And and then, 6 months later, that moment ended up happening for me too, which is crazy. I wanted to talk about 2 moments in sales school, though. There's a moment that I still remember, and this is, 17 years ago, that we as a team and organization, and by the way, I've seen you do this other times now, but as a team in that room, we weren't we were getting soft. We're getting a little bit of lackadaisical. We were, maybe, just chatting in the break room a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about stopping people in a moment and I'll stop talking. What do you do?
That's a great question. And I'm
Yeah.
actually going to go back to the why, if you don't mind.
Yeah, please.
You have to, as a trainer or any leader, you have to be able to slow the game down. I talk with my team in Illinois about this a lot. Like whenever you watch sporting events, I'm not like a huge sporting example guy, but this is just one that fits really well here. They slow the game down, right? So if you're watching football, you're watching hockey, and there's 17 seconds left, right? You slow the game down, right? And you don't try fancy things there. You don't get creative. Like you go back to the game plan. And I think there have been many moments in training where it just wasn't gelling, right? Maybe it was me. Maybe it was the team, it was the class. I don't know, but it just wasn't gelling. And the example that I want to give here is one that I tell every month to everyone that I get in front of, and it's the Chris Hager example. And there was a time in class when I would talk about the why, and I would start class with the whys, and then I would see how the why evolved at the end of class.
Mhm.
And Chris Hager sat in class. He was a district sales coordinator, and I don't think he would mind me saying this, but I don't know if he was 100% engaged as a district sales coordinator at that particular time when I was there. He was kind
Fair.
of he was a funny guy, right? We had a good time. We would go out for drinks, but I'm not sure he was as committed, right, as he was later in his career. And I would go around the room and I would ask everybody their why. And sales school was so powerful then that like people were crying. There
Yeah.
was such an experience in the room that like you manufacture sometimes, but sometimes it's legit, like it's real, right? And I got to Chris Hager. I can remember this office like it was yesterday. He was in the middle of that room, and I got to Chris and I said, "Chris, what's your why? What's changed in the last X amount of days that we've been together?" And he goes, "My why is sour cream." And I said, "Okay, man, you're messing with me, man. Like, let's get to it. Like, I want to go home. Like, the usual stuff, right?" And he goes, "No, Joey, it's sour cream." And I'm like, "Come on, stop playing with me, man. Like, what's your why?" And as the trainer, I had to know, I had to back down and be like, whoa, wait a minute. This is getting a little serious right now. Because what I started to notice is that his eyes were welling up. And I was like, whoa, this is an interesting one for me. So I said, okay, Chris, what's up with sour cream? And he goes, my why is sour cream. And I said, explain. He goes, well, when I was younger, my mom worked 2 jobs and she picked me up from school. She didn't have time to cook, right? She'd have to go on and she had other things going on. So we would always go to my favorite fast food restaurant, which was Taco Bell, and I would always go up there and I forget the order after all these years, but I would order my tacos or whatever the case is. And I would always say, and he would say this to me, I would always say, Mom, can I get the sour cream? And his mother would always say no. Now I did
Yeah.
not realize this until Chris took me through this. But apparently back in the day, maybe even today, if you wanted extra sour cream at Taco Bell, it was 69 cents extra. And they
Yeah.
didn't have the
From
funds
taco
when
to taco
yeah,
supreme, man. It's a
Yeah,
big,
I'm gonna
big
say,
jump.
right?
I
It's a
know
big
this
jump.
story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is a big jump though. As a Taco
I
Bell worker, I remember I
I
made
am
it 2 weeks.
1000% going to Taco Bell tonight for dinner with the kids. It's
Let's
gonna be
go to
great.
Taco Bell.
But it was 69 cents extra, and his mother couldn't afford it. And he said that he never wanted to be in a position where, like, he couldn't afford something for his kids. And I mean, when I left LA, I remember Adam was not exactly happy with me when I left. But I remember having conversations with Adam in his office and being like, dude, you got to put Hager in the role because
Yeah.
he gets it, right? He gets it at
Yeah.
such a deeper level. He's not just going to click slides, right? He's not just going to stand in front of the room and look pretty, but he's actually going to work this through with people and make sure they understand why they're here. And obviously, the rest of the story. Hager took over as trainer, did great things, took over as a region for a very short amount of time, did great things, and took that market to places that it hasn't been in a very long time. So that's really the story of how sometimes, Mikey, you have to stop and you have to seek to understand, right? You have to
Yep.
understand where the room is at. And this is not, for anyone listening on this, that this is not just a sales school training thing. This is a reality in life. Whether it's with your kids, whether it's with your spouse, sometimes you need to stop talking and you need to seek to understand where the other person's coming from so that ultimately you can have a really, really good dialogue.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more.
Attracting and keeping the best talent means offering more than just a paycheck. Aflac Value Added Services delivers real life support for your team. Financial wellness through BrightDime provides employees with the real time, holistic financial picture to help improve spending habits, create budgets, and tackle debt reduction. Employees can keep track of all financial accounts so they can set goals and track progress towards establishing financial security. Aflac Value Added Services because supporting your team means supporting their whole well being.
I remember being as a customer in that class, basically being like, I have not thought about this. And I know that there's something there. And then, you just continuing to poke at it a couple times and then again and again. And you're like, oh man, and those are the moments that, yeah, 17 years later, it's time stamped where I'm like, yeah, I do remember that. Um, and then of course, but hey, you being able to identify that with somebody like Hager, who is again another human being that's Michelle Lee's trainer. That was also the huge person that I wouldn't be here without Hager either. Like it's a absolute fact. And the leadership development that he's put me through over the years has been incredible. But I wanted not to beat a dead horse, but I want to talk about one other thing here, which is you kind of talked about it from a leadership perspective. So we have a lot of future leaders, CITs, people like that, some RSEs that are listening to this. Let's talk about for yourself, your role, like standing on the desk And and let's talk about standing on the desk. And it could be a metaphor, but it also could be a very real thing. That let's talk about what does that moment, and maybe you could expand on what I'm talking about a little bit.
Yeah, well, there's multiple times that I've stood on the desk, Mikey, so you might have to give me a better example for that one, but yeah, I think it's just passion. I've been taught at a very early age that you gotta be passionate about what you do. I teach this to my kids, right? We just came back from spring break, and we were doing some work at the lake house, and I was, like, talking to them about, "You gotta be passionate about the work that you're doing, boys." But I think for me, the standing on the table is about leading, and it's about belief. Nate talks a lot about you have to have belief. Well, as a leader, you've got to drive belief. And driving belief, sometimes you got to stand on the table, right? And
Yeah.
standing on the table is where you get fellowship and people want to be part of something bigger than they are. And I think sometimes we put the wrong people in the wrong roles. And just because they were a really good salesperson doesn't necessarily mean that they can have fellowship, right? So I think that's where standing on the table came from, is that you've got to find people that are willing to follow you, right? But you've also got to find people that are willing to challenge you. And I think that's where a lot of that comes from, Mikey, is just having a good conversation with a room of people, knowing that you are all want the same thing, knowing that you all want greatness for the company, for the organization, for yourself, and rowing in the right direction. I don't think you can successfully stand on the table if you're
Hmm.
not rowing in the right direction, because then I think it goes the other way. So those moments where I've had that table standing, where I've done that, I've known in the room that it was the right thing to do.
Yeah. No, and the bravery behind it, and also just being like, "Hey, I'm going to make this a moment." And again, it's having touch points in somebody's career where it's like, "Okay, I'm gonna get on a stand up on a chair or stand up on a table and say, I know I look insane, but this
Yeah.
matters, and I want you to go all in on yourself in this moment because it is that important." And the fact that, you were the first person I was like, "Yeah, you know what? This is that important." And I think that bravery actually, again, has shown me over the years that that's what you have to give sometimes. And I love that you're willing to give that out to the team.
Yeah, for sure.
So, what you guys were just talking through is so full circle of talking about being in a seat, and Joey, as a trainer today, the impact that we have on individuals. Think about, you shared, you were the trainer for Michael, right? And then you nominated Hager to take that spot, who became my trainer. And then with Michael replacing Hager, Michael and I worked quite a bit together, and he nominated me to take replace him in that as well. Didn't happen that way,
Yeah, they
like
didn't
in where
listen,
we are
which was
today.
crazy, but yeah. Anyways,
The impact of being a trainer and really pushing that, the why behind things, the belief behind things when people first walk in that door of day one of sales school, of why, understanding what the why does and how it pushes individuals to really dig deep and understand what that motivator is to push through the walls, belief in themselves, belief in the processes that we put in place for them as well, which is pretty powerful, of talking about the impact that we make today. So, let's actually bring it back to, because we see a lot of individuals, from even from a trainer seat, even from a leadership seat, we see a lot of different individuals who have a strong why. So let me ask you, like, what separates someone that has that strong why from someone who's just interested in success? So saying, that 18-year-old, like, leaving, can I do this kind of scenario?
Yeah, I think it's never being too good for the work. Is
mm,
a big one.
It's good.
I'm a big believer in never being too good for the work. In my market office, there is a market director, and there are two market coordinators, and there are myself. If my market coordinators are, stuffing some envelopes, I will jump in and I will do the work with them. And I think that's really important to show the team that I'm committed to them. But also, too, I mean, that's to drive their why, I have to help them drive their why. And if that means that I've got to do the work alongside with them, I have no problem with that. And, I have one of my market coordinators right now that wants to take my role. right? I think they know that I'm on the back end of this thing, right? So I think they're waiting for me to hopefully get a market soon, right? So I
Yeah.
can that they can like open up that spot. But I'm training him, right? And I'm taking under my wing and I'm showing him what it's like to do the work and to have the passion and all those different things. So I mean, to answer your question, Michelle, I think it's too good for the work, and I think you also have to be very passionate. I was lucky enough to hear Jack Welch speak many years ago, and
Mm.
Jack said, "You got to have so much passion it's coming out your ears." And never apologize for your passion. And Adam taught me that actually. Never apologize for your passion, right? Because people used to get really mad at me because I'm so intense and they'd be like, oh, you're too passionate. Like, calm down. Adam said, don't ever lose that. Don't ever lose your passion because so many people don't have that. So I think it's passion and I think it's, you know, not being too good for the work.
That's a
I
huge one,
see
man.
that.
I love that. I love that. I was just
I
gonna say one quick one, and then I'm going back to you, Michelle. But like, this is a a Joey story. So he used to in Chicago. Speaking of just leading from the front, he would like take people around, and he would take his team around in his minivan, in the dead of winter of Chicago, which I don't think we even understand what that feels like, and hit doors in your hit doors. The minivan story is real, right, Joe?
Yeah. Yeah, it's the brand. I mean, that's what I wanted my brand to be. I wanted the other districts and regions to see that, right? I wanted them
Hmm.
to see that I would go out with people and I wasn't very good, right? I wasn't the number one salesperson, right? But what I had is something that a lot of people lack today. And I have strong work ethic and I never give up. And that's one of the things that I think has made me successful through the years, besides not being the junk drawer is the fact that I will outwork anybody, right? And I will navigate it and I will get creative and I will come up with strategy. And that's really what that was back in the days, me putting everyone together and saying, hey, listen, guys, like we're all in this thing together and let's go out and it's snowing out, but let's go have some fun, right? Or it's raining out, let's go have some fun. And I would do weird things. I would take them for picnics, right? I would do the things that so many leaders are scared to do nowadays. Right. And I still do these things. Like I still do random things with my team because those are the things they're going to remember, right? When I write somebody a card, I don't just write them a blanket card that the other 25 people that we get. I write about 30 cards a week and they're all individual cards. A good portion of my Monday, besides being on calls, is writing cards to people and motivating them. And in their card, guess what I write? What their why is, right? I talk about their family. Like I want to connect with people at such a deeper level. And a lot of this came from John Maxwell wrote a book and it's called Many People Communicate, but Very Few Connect. And it's really about what we're talking about today. Where like everyone communicates, right? I could go on Instagram and I can communicate, but am I connecting with anybody? Probably not for the most part. But the art of connection is being able to have those conversations and to be able to know kind of where everybody's at and to know when to push and to know when to back off a little bit to your earlier point, Mike. Like that's the thing. Is sometimes, you can't push too hard because that might go the other way. So it's that delicate balance that you have to have.
Hmm.
You guys got
I've
me
been
all
on the
fired up today.
I love it.
I've been on the reciprocal end of the one of a handwritten card from Joey Nasca. So I know, when I first stepped into the role myself, I was like, handwritten cards go a long way. And I talk about that through trainings as well, because not often does someone get a handwritten card. So finding a way to connect that communication and a skill set that I've picked up from Joe Bizzello, who's been a guest on this as well, is it's a memory one, remembering facts about people. So when you're actually having a conversation, it's a trick, guys. I'm telling my whole team is being able to recall those moments that you have in a conversation that are very personal, not work related kind of things, and so forth. That helps you kind of move that connection along with individuals as well. So it goes a long, long way. And I
Yeah,
was going to say, go ahead.
and Michelle, to your point, like I love that from Bazzello, like because I think so many people do it, but they do it the wrong way. And I want to clean this up a little bit. And what I mean by that is that like you truly have to take an interest in
Yeah.
what their facts are. And I see a lot of leaders nowadays that they want to like act like they do, but they really don't. And I
Hmm.
think if anybody's listening and you take nothing else away from the conversation that we've had today, like really take an interest in people, right? Maybe spend a little bit more time with them. Don't just do it via text, right? Call them or have coffee with them, right? And really like remember those facts. I get mad at myself when I forget a fact. And listen, I'm human, right? I make a lot of mistakes, and I'll see somebody at a meeting, and I'll just forget something. Like I'll forget that their kid had a soccer game, last week, or a big tournament, right? Or I'll forget what position their kids play in hockey, right? I get really mad at myself when I do that because I owe it to them as a leader to make sure that I'm helping them get to where they want to be.
Yeah.
And I don't think enough of that happens. I think a lot of us stand on stage and we say that people are begging for leaders, right? That the company's begging for leaders, and we talk about belief and we talk about all these things, but you've got people around you that drive belief. You've got leaders in the room. You've just got to find a way to connect with them.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll tell you that one thing that I've always know with you is you take that work serious. I mean, that's why, like, even right now I can see it on your face. You're like, you thought about a moment where you didn't have something that you cared about to talk to that person about, and you're like, you look at it as a miss, and that level of being serious and that engaged, and it is everything. You live it, and you can't hide behind it. You can't make it up. And I do feel like a lot of people inauthentically are like, oh, I'm gonna write down 2 facts about this person and regurgitate it back to them, and it's like, no, that's not what we need, and that's not helping anybody.
Right, right.
Um,
Exactly.
so this has gone already incredibly, incredibly fast. And we are about to move into what we call the rapid fire round. But the one that I just wanted to just like throw out to you really quickly is just if you wanted and you just said, hey, this is one takeaway that I want this team to, absolutely get. But, if you're talking to somebody that right now maybe they're in their first 90 days and they're like, hey, I might be in, I might be out, but like the pressure's coming. Maybe a couple of the wins that they thought were supposed to happen didn't happen. Maybe their DSE didn't have the best day at the office, and maybe they left a meeting without a tangible next step. Maybe something like that. What would you tell that person? What's something that you think that they should be tapping into, and what should they be taking away?
Yeah, I mean, I could give you all types of books. I can give you all types of things you can do to make yourself better. I would say the thing that I would tell that associate in the first 90 days is to find the person that believes in them the most.
That's good.
And I know that sounds very simple. I really, really mean it when I say find the person that believes in you the most. When Adam said, "Joey, let's go to LA," I had a girlfriend at the time, and she's now my wife, which is awesome. But I had to go home and I had to say, like, "Hey, listen, like this guy wants us to move like 2,000 miles across the country. We don't really have any money. Like, we don't like have a lot going for us right now. Like, you want to come?" And
Yeah.
without skipping a beat, by the time that conversation was done, she was like, "Absolutely, let's go." And there have been many situations in my athlete career where I've gone home to her and I've said, "Hey, listen, do you wanna move here? Do you wanna go there? What does this look like?" And she's been like, "Absolutely." And before I know it, an hour later, she'll have, like, a list of schools pulled up for the kids, right, in that area. So use that example with you because you've got to find that person that believes in you, not the person that's negative, right? Not the person that's trying to cut you down, not the person that's jealous. You've got to find the person that says, "I believe in you, let's go."
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
is what I would say to somebody in their first 90 days because belief is a dangerous thing, man. It is a dangerous thing. And when people believe in you, it is like game over.
Yeah. Yeah, I happen to marry the person that believed in me the most as well. And the other thing I'll just say to you is, you talked about Adam believing in you. So, that it was a very similar thing. I remember you actually, I was in the office. I was meeting Adam for lunch, and Adam was having his like vision casting meeting. At that time, I always talk about like, oh yeah, I had less than $40. That time, I had like negative $100 in my bank account. But he was like taking me out to that magical Adam lunch, and laying out the what the world is going to be looking like for me. All of it completely came true, by the way, which is unbelievable. But because I knew that that guy believed in me, because I knew that you believed in me, I drove past, and I'm not exaggerating, 3 regional offices. One of them was 10 minutes from my house to sit in traffic with gas money I didn't have to pay. in a parking lot that I couldn't afford to pay, and to make cold calls in an office in Santa Monica for no reason because my phone worked everywhere. But I wanted to be next to people that believed in me. And that's a something that, and none of you guys actually had a real vested interest in me, except for the fact that it's just like, hey, they recognize something, and that was absolutely enough for me. So I think that that's a great takeaway for me as well, because I think that we forget that one.
Yeah, and you probably don't remember this, Mikey. I have it at home, and I'm so sorry. I'm coming back from spring break, and I didn't get a chance to get this, but I'm gonna send it to you and Michelle so that you can forward it on to your team and attach it to this podcast somehow. But one of the things that we did in sales school way back in the day, Mikey, is we did this thing called the universal need.
Oh
And
yeah.
I would like throw the duck around, and people would be doing it left and right. Like you never knew when it was coming. It was like, it was like the hot seat, right? And I
Hmm.
remember you made the world, right? You took and you made the world and you wrote the universal need all around the world. And you gave this to me at the end of class. And I still have it to this day.
That's
So
crazy.
That's so cool.
you want to talk about I'm so mad at myself because I meant to pull it out last night before I left home and
Dude,
I just didn't
that's
do it.
crazy.
But I will send it to you, and it's so interesting because that's what really belief is. Like I believed in you, and I kept that after all these years. After moving across country again, right? I
Yeah.
kept it because it was so important, and that's the impact that I'm trying to make in the organization. Right? Is it's not just about the sales number; it's about the little things that you do to ultimately get to where you want to be. So I love your message, Mikey.
Oh man, well that's crazy, and yeah, especially if you would have met me in sales school, I would probably have not have kept. I would have put that right in the trash. But thank you for believing me, Joe, because that's amazing.
Start your week strong with the Monday morning meeting. Tune in for team accolades that celebrate success, contests that keep you motivated, and announcements that keep you ahead. Don't just start your Monday, own it with the Monday morning meeting.
You talked about books, you talked about things like that. So one rapid fire one that I have for you. What is a book that you've recommended more than any other book? 'Cause I know there's a lot, but the book that you've recommended more than any other book to anybody out there.
I feel like every time you ask somebody this question, they must like go crazy because there are some. I read all the time. I am
I know it
constantly
sucks.
reading.
I don't even know the
Um,
answer.
I'm gonna say the book that I recommend the most is one that I've actually FedExed out like 4 times last week. It's Leading Without Authority,
Mm,
and it is really about stepping up and making sure that even if you don't have the title, you are still the leader, and it's about driving belief in the team. It's one of my favorite books. Every time, if anybody that listens to this has gotten one from me, what I do is I highlight all the things that I think are really important in that book. And it's that book has really made an impact on me because sometimes I don't have the title, but I still have to be a strong leader. And that has really made me understand, like, hey, listen, like you got to keep going, right? Like you can't give up. You can't sit at home. Like you've got to keep going.
wow. I'm actually looking at the little circle of the rules of co-elevation, and that looks awesome. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm gonna check this one out. That's cool. Michelle.
Okay, I just put that on my list too because we've got some long flights coming up. So mine is going to be my favorite question of the year so far is if your stress was a mascot, what would it be?
Oh, this is easy. A bear.
It's one of the quickest answers I've gotten.
Yeah, bears are interesting because they know when to hibernate and they know when to get crazy. And if you know my personality, which Michelle, and Mike, I'm like a bear. I know when to be quiet. I know when to hibernate, but then I also know when it is time to eat and I've got to make some things happen.
Yeah, you
I asked
absolutely
him
do.
that at the conference. We were talking, and I was like, I was asking him about the working genius, the widgets and stuff like that. And I was like, so are these yours or which ones are yours? Because I'm pretty observant when I'm in the room, like who jumps into things, who tries to take lead, and who just sits back and like observes. And when he needs to turn it on, Joey
Oh
definitely
yeah,
does that.
absolutely. Yeah, there's times at conferences so reserved, and like wallflower, and then when it's time, it's time. I love it. All right, Joe. So just landing this plane, I would love to do this again. And before we went on here, I want to start off. I want to finish by again just saying thank you. Thank you for who you've been for me, and thank you for pushing me, and thank you for believing in me, and then also just walking the walk, man. I mean, I think that's such a big deal, but you were brave enough to ask more from me, and I think that that's something that a lot of leaders need to do is tell people that they need to do more and they need to take themselves more seriously at moments. And I just want to say thank you for doing that for me. And yeah, Michelle, why don't you help us land this plane because I'll just be talking to Joe forever.
Well, Joey, thank you so much for being on the podcast with us. And I appreciate you bringing your passion. I think I always intentionally listen when you're speaking. At all the conferences I've seen you at, I'm always like, oh, he's going to have some good stuff. So making sure to be intentionally listening when you do present because nobody actually becomes elite, right? It starts with a decision and it's backed by a reason that refuses to let you quit. So knowing our whys are so powerful. And to everybody listening, stop playing around, get clear, get focused, and go to work. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe to the LA Legends, leave us a review, and join us next time. Until then, keep leading with purpose.